We're going to have Dan do a few slides on Armada and the future of edge AI and to kind of give you his founder story. And then I'm going to ask a few questions to kick off, and I'm going to encourage all of you to participate that as well. So ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dan Wright, founder and CEO of Armada AI.
Thank you, Sinan. First of all, I want to really thank Gorky for introducing me to Sinan a while back. There are some people that you meet and it really does change your life, and Sinan is definitely one of those people. Just looking around the room, just today, as Mayor Stapleton was saying, with all the incredible work they're already doing with Flock and Brink drones, talking about how we can, in Starlink, talking about how we can increase public safety at the edge. Ryan, right after that, our team was working with his team to figure out how can we take the amazing applications that he's already built, the amazing AI, bring it to the edge. So it's a really special group of people. I'm really happy to be here. And I want to talk to you about the edge and really why it matters. I'm going to get my little clicker here. The backstory on the company is it actually started kind of like what we just talked about as a friend story. So I am very close friends with one of the co-founders of Anduril, Trey Stevens. And Trey is also a partner at Founders Fund. We had been friends for many years. We had never worked together before. But I'm an entrepreneur, so I built some successful companies, including, we were talking earlier with some people about AppDynamics, was one of my companies that I built. That ended up getting bought by Cisco for $3.7 billion. And I did that, and then I did another company, AI company called DataRobot. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, Trey sent me a draft of an article that he wrote called Choose Good Quests. And the whole idea behind that was that there's sort of a crisis going on in Silicon Valley where it's lost its way. A lot of people that have some modicum of success in Silicon Valley, they go on to become VCs or they just do angel investing, but they're not actually focused on the good quest, the big problems that need to be solved that nobody else is working on and maybe nobody else could solve. And so that was the challenge of this, and we were talking about what could be a good quest that I could work on and really take forward. And right around that same time, another friend of mine said, hey, you might want to talk to the SpaceX team. And I had become close friends with some of the people over there, including Tim Hughes, who runs Starshield, and Gwynn and Robert Shotwell. Gwynn's the president and COO of SpaceX. And we started to talk about how Starlink is bringing connectivity to a lot of remote locations that never have reliable internet, but nobody has brought compute, and nobody has brought AI. And so I sort of became obsessed with that problem, and I started to look into it. And I was thinking about this in the context of this matrix. So this was something that Trey and I were riffing on as he was doing this article. And it talks about different types of quests, right? So there's like easy quests that may be really valuable, or there might be bad quests that are also easy, right? So like, doing nothing is an example of this. It's pretty bad quest because you're not producing anything, but it's really easy to do, right? So this is kind of a matrix. And I had really decided that I wanted to work on a hard quest that was also a good quest. So it wasn't just any quest. And so I started to dig into this specific problem, and I realized that it's actually a big problem. And the reason for that is that about 70% of the planet does not have access to AI. And that, for people I talk to, like in San Francisco, where I live today, or LA, as Sinan was mentioning, my wife and I actually met at Pepperdine, so we live down here. We come down here a lot. She's on the board. Around here, it's really easy to think that we're just surrounded by AI, surrounded by the latest technology, and it must be like that everywhere. That is not the case. Most of the world doesn't even have reliable internet, but now that's changing with Starlink. And this is what actually a map of the world looks like. If you look at where are all the AI data centers today, why is it this way? The cloud, as people think about it, was built 20 years ago, decades ago, in a world where it was really optimized for where the data was. And at that point in time, it was in the major metro centers, primarily in highly developed markets. That whole dynamic has changed dramatically. And the reason is Starlink. So Starlink, for those who don't know, it launched in public beta in November of 2020. And at the time, it was really just a consumer product. So it was the thing that you would use in your camper when you were going on a road trip. It was something that you might put at your house. But it wasn't being used for any sort of business use, and it wasn't being used for any sort of government use for the first 2 years. That all changed in 2022, where SpaceX made a decision to take Starlink into enterprise, and then with Starshield to start working with the government. And flash forward 5 years to where we are today, November of 2025. It's in 150 countries around the world, and it's growing rapidly. And you might have read recently they acquired $18 billion worth of spectrum from EchoStar, and they're now actually becoming the world's biggest telco. So pretty soon in the next 5 years, what you're going to see is an environment where there's internet everywhere in the world that is as good as fiber in the ground in terms of speed, in terms of cost, in every way. And so that opens up a world of opportunity. And this is because of the second thing that's happened, which is that the cost of cameras and sensors and drones and robots has gone down 10x in the last 5 years. And so those technologies are exploding. And they're generating a huge amount of data. About 75% of all data today is being generated at the edge because of technologies like this. They create a lot of unstructured data. But the issue is, if you don't have any good way to process the data, it's actually not that valuable. The data is by far the most valuable at the moment that it's processed. Moment that it's produced, sorry. The other thing that is true is that as a result of this dynamic, the spread in internet to places where there are not data centers, and then the use of these technologies that are generating a lot of data at the edge, most data is going to need to be processed outside of those traditional data centers. So how are we going to do that? And I guess more importantly, like, why does it matter? Why is this a big quest that's worth talking about? Well, data is the most valuable at the point of generation, as I mentioned. But also, if you don't use the data at the exact moment when it's generated, oftentimes it causes big problems, huge problems. And you take an example. Let's take an emergency response scenario. We work with the state of Alaska responding to avalanches and responding to floods. Some of you probably read about the floods. The issue is they were already using drones and Starlink, but until you actually deploy some sort of infrastructure locally, they had 30 hours of latency. Well, it turns out that avalanches and floods, they don't wait 30 hours, right? You need to be able to use the data immediately in real time. And so that's where we come in. The other thing that's happening is that in the wake of ChatGPT and all these really powerful AI models, a lot of Fortune 500, Global 2000 CEOs are saying, how do I actually take those take those models and use them in operations at the edge for inference in order to do different things, whether that is triggering a robot to take a specific action or automating some sort of action in real time. An example of this is we work with a lot of energy companies, and a lot of them are now trying to do fully autonomous rigs. Why are they trying to do that? Rigs are extremely dangerous. People get hurt all the time. In addition to the human cost of that, it results in those rigs shutting down, and you get what's called unplanned downtime. If you use AI at the edge, you can basically have a 24/7 fully autonomous rig that never goes down. And you can also just increase your overall productivity, so you're increasing the amount of energy that's produced. I gave the example already with Alaska, but another example of disaster scenario is when the fires broke out here last year. We actually were one of the first people with SpaceX to jump into action, and at the time we were just doing it for free because we wanted to help. And now we work with almost every fire department in the state, and we work with CAL FIRE, helping them with real-time response. I wish we would have gotten started with them earlier, but we got started as a result of that work. And we also are working closely with the Department of Defense. As an example, we did just recently the first offshore edge computing that the Navy has ever done. So putting, we call these galleons, modular AI data centers, in the belly of a ship, an aircraft carrier, processing large amounts of data from drones, running AI models from Palantir and Anduril and others securely at the edge, totally disconnected to the internet, never been done before. Those types of use cases, which are really important because increasingly a lot of conflicts are going to be fought using those types of technologies, drones, autonomous technology, and oftentimes it's going to be in remote areas where you need some ability to do edge data processing. And so this is the gap. We call this the digital divide that we're very focused on filling. And if you look in the next 5 years, our goal is to make it like this. So basically you'll have the cloud data centers where they are today. Maybe a few more data centers are getting built. It takes 2 to 3 years to build a hyperscale data center. And then what we do is modular, rapidly deployable AI data centers that can be deployed within weeks or days. And we see a world where it's going to cover the entire rest of the world that we call the remote edge and connect the whole planet. And maybe even beyond that. I was actually with Gwynn and Robert Shotwell and Tim Hughes this past weekend in Utah with my wife, Betsy. And now they want us to put these in space. So we'll see if that happens next. But that's a little bit about what we do. Again, I think my call to action for everybody here, and this might be a topic of discussion, is how do we choose good quests ourselves, work on big problems that really matter, and then rally people behind our own missions, our own quests, and then also encourage them to do the same thing, because there's a lot of big problems that need to be solved in the world, and I think technology and entrepreneurs is a big way that we're going to get it done.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, Dan. And part of leadership too is communication. You've got a great communication style. I could put him in front of elected officials one-on-one. I could put him in front of an audience in front of thousands. So good communication skills is an essential ingredient to leadership. And I got mine from Toastmasters, which I thought was a beer. When my dad told me about it, I thought it was a beer drinking club, so I was very excited. Not even close. But talking about Armada a little bit, like when you look at the current AI landscape, what do most people get wrong about the real bottlenecks? Is it compute, connectivity, or is it like something entirely different?
Yeah, I mean, I think where people mostly get it wrong is that they think that compute is ubiquitous, right? People kind of feel like, oh, don't we have hyperscale data centers everywhere? Doesn't everybody have access to AI? It used to be that the connectivity was the biggest blocker, but now Starlink is solving that. But the infrastructure is really the blocker today. The nice thing is you can think about it in a different way than you used to. It used to be if I want infrastructure in a place, I have to wait 2 to 3 years. It's construction, it's permits, et cetera. Now it's like parking, and you can keep it permanently mobile.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about your modular units. It's getting a lot of attention. Can you walk us through what they actually do and how quickly you can deploy them compared to traditional data centers? Maybe give us an example of a client you're working with or a municipality.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about us, first of all, these units, these modular AI data centers, we call them galleons. Everything we do at Armada is in the Armada theme, so a galleon is a ship, and then they all have different names depending on which size that you're talking about. One of the things that was a key was doing it full stack. And what do I mean by full stack? We do the hardware, we do the software, we do the AI, and then we even allow different third-party applications and AI models in our marketplace to be one-click deployed and run on that infrastructure at the edge. And so I think that is the big thing that it was really key to unlock the value, because the people that are doing the job, the first responder, the person working on the oil rig, the person on the Navy ship, they're not IT people.
Right.
They want it to work as easily as ChatGPT does, and that's our job, is to make it that simple.
So you've said before, AI needs to live where the data lives. So why is that so important, and what kinds of industries or applications benefit from this sort of approach?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different applications. So I gave the Alaska one, but I like to give the ones where it really could impact human lives. The Navy work that we're doing is near and dear to my heart. My grandfather served in World War II. His ship was actually hit by a kamikaze. He almost died, and so that's kind of one of the reasons why I named it Armada, was naval superiority. And naval superiority in the age of AI means that we need to have these galleons on every one of our Navy ships. Most of you probably know we can't build ships as fast as China can, but what we can do is make the ships that we have much more productive by supplementing them with this type of technology, drones. Now they even have autonomous ships. Anduril's got its Fury,
Right. Yep.
autonomous jets. You're going to see more and more of that, and that's all going to require these distributed brains. And we're even talking about putting these on islands in the first chain in the South China Sea in case there's an issue with Taiwan in 2027, just making sure we're ahead of that.
That's awesome. And you've deployed in some pretty extreme and harsh environments, remote environments. Can you share one deployment that really surprised you and how fast you guys were able to put it together?
Yeah, we are the first company ever to do the extremes, the extreme edge. And what I mean by that is we've deployed in the middle of the ocean. We've deployed in the hottest deserts. For example, we work with Aramco, the largest energy company in the world. We've deployed in the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert for the entire summer, and it just works. It's really important for them because all their rigs and refineries are critical national infrastructure, so they can't do anything with the data unless you actually bring the data center to the data on the site behind the firewall. So we do that. And on the other extreme, we've done a lot of stuff in the Arctic. Even recently, I was in Norway. They're now stockpiling this technology in bunkers, getting ready, because some people don't appreciate there's a border between Norway and Russia, and the Russians and the Chinese are all over the Arctic. So we've gone from the extreme cold to the extreme hot, and even the middle of the ocean.
So many of the IEC members here today are leading organizations trying to operationalize their own AI at scale. What lessons or even missteps have you seen companies take along with that journey?
I think the key thing is that you have to attach it to an objective. Like, AI for the sake of AI is doomed to fail. It needs to be actually in service of some key objective for the company. And so one of the things that we do with all our customers is what's called a joint success plan. We say, okay, what are the key initiatives that you have, the key goals, whether that's, hey, I want to be able to adopt AI, but I'm worried about my cloud bill going through the roof. Okay, it's a more efficient way to do that. Or, hey, I have unplanned downtime for my rigs. How do I cut that down significantly? Hey, we had people die. Like, I'm actually working with one of the largest mining companies in the world right now, and their big thing is that 3 years ago they had a dam break, and it killed. They're responsible for these dams. This is in the Amazon, and it killed 300 people. And they have data all over, they have sensors all over these dams. They have them throughout Brazil, but they've never had the infrastructure to process the data locally. Now we're enabling that. So it's figuring out what is the big problem, and I like to focus on the big ones that actually impact millions, tens of millions, billions of dollars, or human lives, because those are the ones that really move the needle.
My last question is really 5 years out. Where do you see edge infrastructure going, and what role do you hope Armada plays in that?
Yeah, I actually did a blog right when I launched the company. It was distributed compute for a distributed world. What we're seeing is that data is going to be everywhere. And again, like I was talking about, you're going to have Starlink everywhere, providing connectivity that's as good and as fast as fiber in the ground. And so we see that you're going to need distributed infrastructure. Our goal is to do that and be that provider, that hyperscaler for the edge. One of the interesting things is that the edge is constantly being redefined as well. So I'll blow your minds for a second. I mentioned I was with the SpaceX team this past weekend, and you might have seen some stuff in the news about data centers in space. I talked to the CFO, Brett, and I said, because he's the more conservative of all of them, I said, are you serious about this data centers in space thing? Because if so, we should work on it with you. And he said, absolutely, it's going to happen. He said, what's going to happen is that next year, there's going to be in-orbit refueling of Starship. He said the following year, in 2027, you're going to have data centers on the moon. We're going to have a base on the moon. The initial base will be Starship, but then there will be Optimus robots building a permanent base on the moon. We're going to need compute for that in space. And then he said by 2028, fall of 2028, you're going to see not one, but many missions to Mars. And in order to actually do anything with Mars, you're going to need robots to actually build a base. You're going to need to be able to, they're talking about building underground bunkers. So the edge, as we think about it, today, next 5 years, it's next few years, it's about this. But longer term, it's even about outer space and other planets.
And I'm so glad you hit on that. As many of you know, we just hosted Impact in Washington, D.C. A lot of you were there. Type 1 Ventures, which is one of the largest venture capital firms in the space deep tech market, it was our partner for that. We will be hosting at Mar-a-Lago on Saturday, next Saturday. So if this interests you, we're going to unpack a lot of that, because Axiom Space is going to be there. A lot of the right people that are moving that conversation forward are going to be in the room, and it is unbelievable. I mean, we're talking about trillions of dollars coming into the GDP, thousands of jobs in America. It's what the president wants. It's what the admin's gunning for. It's going to be a really great time. So if you guys are interested, I know, Ryan, you've been a couple times with me to Mar-a-Lago. It's really one of the most, if not the most special place in the world. And that being said, I'm going to come around the room right now and just allow you to ask a question for Dan. Anything about his founder story, about Armada, about your own AI challenge. I'll bring the microphone, just announce who you are, and then maybe just ask your question. So firsthand gets Tim Schenk.
My question is about, you hear, like I've heard on the All In podcast, that the race for AI is going to determine, the next superpower, and that we're in a race against China. And you mentioned things about, Taiwan and whatnot, but then you're saying this is going to be basically access for everybody. Is who controls the access to this AI? And is it similar to like how we don't allow every country to have nuclear power?
Yeah, great question. Back in July, I was in DC at this Winning the AI Race summit that the president spoke at. And we had already been talking to the administration about this AI action plan that was announced that day. We had actually done our own white paper called American AI Dominance. And the whole premise of it, which was directly aligned with the AI action plan that ended up being released, is that there is a global AI race going on, and it's going to play out just over the next few years. It's not like 10 years out, 20 years out. It's happening right now. And if you read the news, this is very obvious, because you see that Huawei, which is a Chinese state-backed company, is now exporting its full AI stack, and it's advertising that it has a full AI stack, all the way from the hardware to the AI models now with DeepSeek. And they're exporting that to their countries that they want to do business with. Malaysia is a good example that was just in the news. They're being very, very aggressive about that. And then they're also being very aggressive about using the technology internally, and their goal is to just make sure that in 5 years the entire world is running on the Chinese AI stack. And I tell people that is not a world I want to live in, because they're going to have backdoors all over that thing. And you think about it, they have control over the AI they're going to teach your kids. And I have actually three little kids. That's a very scary thought to me. And so I don't want to live in that world. And so what we're partnering with the administration on is American AI dominance. So making sure that wherever we have energy, which is the biggest kind of necessity for AI and oftentimes the biggest blocker for AI today, we can co-locate our infrastructure with that energy. As an example, I was just with Secretary Burgum in North Dakota. Most people don't realize there's 2 gigawatts of stranded natural gas. Our largest galleon is 1.7 megawatts, and they're stackable. So if you want within weeks to create a 20 or a 50 megawatt AI factory powered by natural gas, we're the best solution in the world to do that. And then because it's mobile, we can actually export it faster than China can via Huawei. So we can actually win that global AI race. So that's another big thing that we're focused on. And as far as the analogy to nuclear technology, I do think it is that important. I think if you win on AI, you win. And if you lose, you lose. And so we have to win. And so that's all about speed. China is moving extremely fast. At the same time we made this announcement, we announced we raised another $130 million, and we're going after that and making sure that we beat China. So I do think that's a really important issue, and something that you're going to see play out just over the next few years. Even what we're talking about on the moon, I mean, that's also a race against China. Most people don't realize what they're doing, but they're very serious about creating a base up on the moon. And so, the president said we got to beat them.
Hey, Dan here.
Oh, hey, Dan.
You say you deployed on the Navy and then in disaster areas. When I was in the Coast Guard, I used to chase hurricanes. So do you have a module that you could put into maybe the sea buoy so you can kind of get data on hurricanes or what is happening out there?
Yeah, they're very mobile, and we have different form factors depending on what you're trying to do. They go as small as like a Pelican case, so very, very small, or very large, like we were talking about with the Leviathans. And as far as the hurricanes go, yeah, that's a big focus, not just offshore but onshore. When a hurricane hits, you want to be able to have real-time tactical response in that situation. But then also, you have to deal with the aftermath of it. So being able to bring in mobile infrastructure for hospitals, things like that, that's important. And as far as the Coast Guard goes, I think when we were in DC, we met with a good friend of mine, Dusty Williams, who's now the Senate liaison for the Coast Guard. And we've been working with him and then Tim Hughes over at SpaceX to try to help them out. They were just recently in the news. They're building Arctic cutters, and a lot of those are going to need mobile compute, because similar types of use cases where you're trying to enable real-time response in those really remote locations using drones and other technology that generates a lot of data. Go ahead.
Josh is my name. So I was a Navy Helo pilot before, and the amount of time I had to spend going into a small room describing what the ship that pointed a gun at me looked like, I wish I had this. But what I'm working a lot with is end users trying to figure out from the beginning, what's the use case we want for this data, and then building infrastructure with them going backwards.
Yeah.
How do you guys do that with your customers to say, hey, we can gather a ton of data, it's totally useless, we don't use it for some reason. How do you build kind of use cases for them to understand what they're going to use their data for, and then build the right amount of infrastructure instead of just building for infrastructure's sake?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, thank you for your service. We have a lot of Navy vets in our company, and that's one way that we do it, is that we have people in the company that actually understand the use cases and the need. And then the second thing we do is we embed ourselves in those situations. So as an example, I mentioned that we did the first offshore edge computing that the Navy has ever done. That was part of their Unitas exercise. This has not been publicly announced, so Atoms and Bits don't tweet anything or anything, but we'll be talking about this publicly soon. And the use case was, we were with them throughout that entire exercise. We had people on the ship, and then there were certain models that they wanted to run. A lot of them were like from Palantir. They have applications called Minotaur and Maven. They're also doing a lot of work now with XAI using the latest models. They do a lot more than Grok, which will come out soon. And being able to run those securely without any connection to the internet. And then if they want to send the metadata back to some faraway location, just being able to use Starshield to do that. But otherwise, they have a private network on the ship. So the short answer is we embed ourselves with the customer. We figure out where do they have a lot of data being generated that they don't have a good way to process. And then just as importantly, what are the workloads that they want to run at the edge that if they had the infrastructure, they would. Minotaur and Maven being good examples of that. And then we go from there.
Any other questions for Dan? Jay, yeah. Why don't you just go ahead and ask?
Yeah, so as a design professional, architect, engineer, our clients are developers. We develop data centers.
Yeah.
The first meeting, the first conversation is always about power.
Yeah.
And the infrastructure is not there.
Mm-hmm.
Power in it. Can you speak about how we're going to catch up with the power demand?
Yeah, great question. So there's multiple ways that we're going to do it. One is utilizing the power that we have available today, and we're a big proponent of, and this is something that's also in the AI action plan, we need to use all of it. There's about 6 gigawatts of stranded energy around the country. We need to put that all to use, but it also is pretty well known we're going to need about 100 gigawatts over the next few years to beat China. So that alone even is not going to get us there. And so you're going to need things like solar. You're going to need things like these micronuclear reactors, and we're partnering with some companies, even some companies that I got introduced to through Synon, who are focused on that. The nice thing about our system is that we can just plug into any power source, and that's ranging from, with the Navy we just use ship's power. That's the only thing that they use. To if they forward deploy it, because they can also be taken by helicopter or in a C-130, you can just use a generator. To now people are looking at micronuclear reactors. There's advanced solar from companies like Exowatt and other companies. So there's a lot of people working on the power problem. The nice thing is we can just plug into whatever power is available. And then as far as the developers go, I'd love to talk to you because we're partnering with a lot of developers around the world. And what they're trying to do oftentimes is say, I want to take these assets that I have, land and power, and I want to get into the AI data center game. And the issue with that is that if you go the traditional route, you have to do construction and permits, and it takes you 2 to 3 years. And oftentimes the chips, by the time you built it, have changed. So you've ended up building the wrong thing. The other issue is that oftentimes you end up overbuilding because you don't know exactly what the demand is going to be, so you're taking some risk. With our system, we are able to rapidly iterate the design to be updated for the latest chips. We work very closely with NVIDIA, for example, so they actually worked hand in hand with us on the GB300s to make sure our design is the fastest way to deploy the GB300s and get those up and running. But then also that you can flex into the demand. So you can start with 50 megawatts and then flex your way up to a gigawatt versus having to build for a gigawatt, and then you find the thing's only 70% taken. So
Maybe 1 or 2 last questions. Yeah, John.
Yeah. The big bugaboo over history has been the state, the regulatory state. Are you able to get through more efficiently simply because of the demand and the risk to the nation of not winning this war? Is the bureaucracy waking up, or you just wake up every morning and that's your biggest nightmare?
Great question. So I will tell you, and not getting political, but I will tell you there were times when I went to DC, like for example, right when I was starting the company, I was asked to come out and talk to the top 6 members of the National Security Council. I was actually asked by a friend of mine who's the CTO of Palantir. And it was us and Palantir and Anduril and our drone partner Skydio. And we spent 4 hours talking about the situation in Ukraine. That was the topic of the moment. And we had all these ideas that we gave them about how we could help, and nothing came of it, other than some PR. It mysteriously leaked the same day that all these top VC-backed companies had come and they had given advice. It leaked, and then nothing came of it. Contrast that with this year. This year I've been to DC more in the last several months than I've been the rest of my life combined. Why am I going? The government's actually working with us, and I'll just give you some tangible examples of that. One is, we were with Secretary Burgum recently, and they are opening up federal lands to produce energy. Why are we doing that? It's because we need to beat China, and they're very focused on that. If we don't make use of that energy, we're in a very disadvantaged position because China is not thinking about any sort of environmental damage whatsoever. It's like way, way down. It's not even on the priority list, right? They're fully focused on beating us. And so, that's one. But then there's also like even more tactical things than that. So like in the One Big Beautiful Bill, there's what's called a bonus depreciation rule. And what that allows you to do is if I'm an oil and gas company, like on the way in here, Sinan caught me out front. I was talking to the CEO of Chord Energy, which is one of our large customers. They have a headquarters in Houston, but they're the largest operator today in North Dakota, which, as I mentioned to you, has 2 gigawatts of stranded energy. And what they've done is they said, Chord Energy, if you buy Armada's products, if you buy your AI infrastructure American, you can immediately write that off against your profits. So it doesn't cost you really anything when you net it all out, and you get the benefits of a new revenue stream, you get the benefits of the AI for your internal use. And so they've really catalyzed the private sector in that way to move fast. And then there are things like we work with MP Materials, which is the largest vertically integrated rare earths mining company in the country. They've said, okay, we have a problem that there is 90% dependence on China for rare earth magnets. Why does that matter? Rare earth magnets are how we build drones, they're how we build EVs, they're how we build Anduril's Roadrunners and a whole bunch of other great technology. And if we are dependent on China to build those things, that's a massive problem. So they said, MP Materials, you need to 10x your production this year, but we're not just gonna ask you to do that. We're going to backstop $500 million of your rare earth magnets at a specific price so that China can't undercut you on price, which was always the problem. And that has allowed them to build new factories. It's allowed them to work with us to automate a lot of manual processes so that they can produce more faster and win against China. So again, it comes down to focus and then policy that matches the objective, and we're seeing that in a way that's really refreshing, and that's why you're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs like me spend time in DC.
Last question, yes, Jessica.
So this might sound very juvenile, but what are we doing to ensure that this technology stays in the U.S.? like you said, basically your biggest fear is that China wins this race of AI. So is the government supporting programs that says like, okay, we're going to buy everything or we're going to fund it, or like what is the, I don't know.
No, so
are you allowed to work with other countries?
yeah, so this is actually a huge change. So we used to say, like, just take the NVIDIA chips. We used to say we don't want those going into the wrong hands, and so we're going to be really careful with the export controls to try to minimize the number of these state-of-the-art chips that are going to these international allies. That is the wrong strategy, and the reason is China is being very aggressive pushing this out to the rest of the world. And if we aren't there, then just by necessity, our allies are going to work with China, right? And so we actually want to spread this technology as quickly as possible to our allies. Now, that does not mean that we're going to, give our latest chips or our latest AI models to China, right? But it does mean that for everywhere else, we want to be the best so that everybody wants to work with us. And we need to be not just like a little bit better, we need to be a lot better because China, their manufacturing is so cheap, they constantly are trying to undercut us on price. They will always be cheaper. So we need to be way better and we need to be present. And so, that's actually the third pillar of the AI action plan is that we need to export our American AI stack faster than China can via Huawei, because in the absence of that, everybody's going to run on Chinese infrastructure, which is a huge problem.
Great. Wow, that was amazing, Dan. So much you unpacked there for us. And over the past few weeks, when we met with Speaker Johnson, I know Joshua and a few of you were with us. He called us at the very last minute as we were all leaving DC, and he said, "Come on over to my office right now." And we scrambled, we got on a bus, and we spent an hour with him in a very elongated one-on-one conversation. And so much of what the speaker unpacked there on his anxiety on China leading the AI race. And not only that, but it's a national security thing, right? So not only did I hear from him, but last week I hosted Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio. This isn't just a federal thing. I think a lot of opportunities for Veritone, Armada, Anduril are at the state level as well, knowing all the development that's going in, and top of mind, everything Vivek was talking about was deep tech, nuclear reactors on the moon, all sorts of things that almost seems like scientific Jetsons like that's actually happening in our generation. But it all starts and ends with national security, because if China is ahead building 125 modular nuclear reactors where we only have approval of one, their energy source is going to be 125x on us to power the AI. That's going to give them an advantage. So those are things that our government's trying to deal with, and it's great having companies like yours that can work with them to give them, somewhat of a, get to at least level plank. And I talk to Palmer about it all the time. In fact, I'm going with them up north right now. We're working on a voter registration thing here in California with David Sachs. And one of the things our state has a problem with is just verifying voters, right? And elections, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you just want them to be accurate. So those are the kind of things that we're working on. But I really appreciate everyone for being part of this. If you're interested in Mar-a-Lago, let me know. We've got about 13 seats left. They're probably going to go today. And we're very selective on who's in that room too. And I just got Palantir today, thanks to you. Brock is confirmed. So a lot of good things keep getting better. And it's an honor to serve this role, which we're still kind of figuring out what the IMA is, what IEC is in its relationship with government. But a lot of you guys are helping us define that. So I present to you Dan Wright, Armada. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.